Hello and welcome to IR Thinker, where international affairs are discussed. I'm Martin Zupko. 2 weeks ago, I gave a lecture to my students about radicalization, extremism, and new centers of terrorism. And I realize I speak more and more about the United States. Therefore, today we're going to speak about extremism, radicalization, neo-Nazi movement in the United States. My expert today is Jeff Schoep. Jeff, hello.
Hi, Martin. Thanks for having me.
Jeff is a unique guest. Just follow this sentence. Once America's most notorious neo-Nazi leader, now a consultant to the Simon Wiesenthal Center, an inspirational speaker for Conscience Campus. How contrasty is this sentence? But Jeff has a unique story to tell us and also he will answer many interesting questions. So just briefly, Jeff is going through schools, classrooms, many international seminars, webinars, sharing his compassion and empathy, which help him to reconnect with humanity. In 2020, he founded Beyond Barriers, a non-profit organization dedicated to countering violent extremism and helping others change their lives. So the first question, to clarify all that introduction, will be, who was and who is Jeff Schoep?
Whoa. So, who was I? I got involved in National Socialism or neo-Nazism from a very young age. My grandfather fought in the German army during World War II, so I was fascinated with that family history. Now, I need to preface that by saying my family had no involvement in my involvement in the movement or anything like that. In fact, they were greatly against it and tried everything they could to stop me from being involved in it. My grandfather had said to me a number of years ago, when I was still involved, he said, this path that you're on is going to lead to one of two places, prison or death. And you need to stop. And I was so radicalized at the time. I told him, I said, you might have given up the struggle, but I'll never stop fighting. And I didn't speak to my grandfather in that manner, but and he was actually trying to help me, but I wasn't listening. No one could get through to me. The family, no one was able to get through. But so the entry point for me was that fascination with that family history. And then I got involved in it, and the rest is kind of history. I was involved for 27 years. For 25 of those years, I was the national leader of the National Socialist Movement, which for a time was the largest Nazi organization in the United States. So unfortunately, I spent a lot of years involved in that. Who I am now, as you mentioned, I started Beyond Barriers. I work in peace building. I was speaker with Conscious Campus and the Simon Wiesenthal Center. I go to schools. I reach out to, I also help people with Beyond Barriers. We help people leave extremist organizations of all different types of extremism. And we try to help people reshape their lives and move forward. So I take a lot of the experiences that I had in life and use that in a process, a lot like reverse osmosis, basically reversing the past and moving forward to the future, and try to hopefully help others not take the same path in life.
Jeff, could you please tell us what does it mean to be a leader of a neo-Nazi group in the United States in the modern age? Because like some people, they don't know what does it obtain. Like, are you sitting in some sort of office and you're managing memberships and what sort of events you're going to organize, or what is it in practice? Like, what was your life about? Because it's not easy. It's like being a manager of IBM or Microsoft. People have sort of illusion about those posts. And I think it's good to clarify also for European viewers and international viewers what exactly it means, what you were doing, because it's 25 years, you said, or 27 years. So it's not like 1 year or 6 months. It's basically half of your life when we take the current age.
Right. Leading in a group like that is a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. Basically, it is it's like waking up every single day and you're at war with the world. As far as like the managerial aspect and the day-to-day operations, yes, I organized rallies, sorted out issues between the membership. A lot of times, being a leader in a movement like that was like being counselor, father, grandfather, peer, psychologist, police officer, you name it. You had to be everything for everyone. And but the difficult part of it is being basically at war with the world all the time. I mean, you were fighting against all of the perceived enemies that you had in the world, which was most people, not just minorities and other races, but most white people as well. And then at the same time, you're constantly on guard for people in the group that might be undercover informants or things like that. So you don't know who you can trust. And then there's people that are searching for power or things like that. And then they're trying to get things over on you. And it's literally the best way to sum it up is that you are at war with the world all the time. You wake up every single day. It's an incredibly high stress environment. It's not mentally healthy. It's not physically healthy. It's not good for anybody that's involved in it. And as we know, it's not good for humanity, especially, but for the people that are in it and the families that are involved, it wreaks havoc on people's lives. A lot of people don't think about, we know the outward aspect of it and how ugly it is and how terrible it is for society and for humanity. But a lot of times people don't think about what it does to the families and the loved ones of the people that are involved in it. It seriously damaged my family. It affected my mother's career. It brought a lot of problems on our family.
You come from Minnesota. Your father had some manufacturing business. Your mom dream of being judge. So on one hand, it is like sort of like nice and model family, in the United States. How is it possible that movement, that neo-Nazi movement, was so strong that you stayed 25 years in it? Because I know that people make mistakes. So you can join it for 1 year or 2 years, then you realize that's not something for me. But you stayed that long, and you didn't have, or maybe it's not publicly available information, but from what I know, you didn't have any like huge family problems that you had to escape your family. So why that movement was so strong that it kept you for 25 years?
That's a good question. And, a lot of the trajectory for a lot of people is they believe like people that get involved in this, they've come from a background of trauma. They've been abused as kids and things like that. And those things do happen in all aspects, different aspects of life. So there was those people. But a lot of the people, myself too, they weren't, I came from a good home. My mother was an attorney. She did have dreams of being a judge. And it was my involvement in the movement that stopped that. To better explain that, well, she was an attorney and she had ran to be a judge, and she was elected to be a judge. And there was a formality, the way she explained it to me at the time, this was back in the 1990s. She explained that she had gotten a phone call from the governor of the state, and the governor said, it was a formality where they'd sign off on all the new judges. And the governor said, "Mrs. Schoep, your father fought in the German army during World War II. Your son's a neo-Nazi leader. I do not feel you are fit to be a judge in this state." And that's how it was explained to me. So my involvement in this, destroyed her career. Why does a person stay? There's so many different reasons. For me, my career, everything, my job was rolled up into this. So that gave me excuses. I'm not saying the excuses were right, but in my mind, there were excuses to stay. But it wasn't just that. It was a lot of times it was life experiences. It was things that happened while I was involved, different things that took place. And you get into this involvement. And now I explain it like a cult. When I was involved, if somebody called it a cult, it made me angry. I was like, it's not a cult. It's not like that. And I can tell you, girls that I was dating, that I was seeing, one after another, they were like, "Jeff, this is a cult. You're involved in a cult." And I'm thinking, what is wrong with these girls that I'm picking bad choices? I'm making bad choices in women. It was me. I didn't see it, but everybody else could see it. So the radicalized individual that's involved in this stuff, they don't see it as wrong. They see it as a noble endeavor, as something positive, that I believed that I was fighting for my people, my country. I believed I was a patriot and I was doing something good and noble. So that pushed me on and on and on, thinking that I was doing something good. And when you're in that mindset and you're that radicalized, you don't see the humanity in other people. You see them as others, as the other. And you heard the term othering. And that's exactly what we did, is we othered people. I othered people and didn't see their humanity. And when you look at the world through a lens like that, where it's, you're on this side and everyone else is adversaries, that's a tough way to live. And you become accustomed to it. And then your support system and your network that you have around you is basically all just people that are also involved in that movement or that cult or whatever you want to call it. So now you don't have any other way of looking at things. And anybody that's questioning things, their support network is all involved, because quite often when you get involved in this, you become isolated and you don't have anybody that's outside of the group that you're really friends with or that you're talking with. I was lucky in the sense where my family didn't completely turn their backs on me, but that wasn't the case with a lot of the other people that I knew, that either they ostracized their families or the family ostracized them. So I was fortunate in that sense, but they still couldn't get through to me. So at some point, the only way we kept it together in our family was not to talk about it. It's like we would talk about other things, but we would not discuss politics or anything to do with the movement.
Can you tell us a bit about the members? Like, as you said, many times people have sort of perception that most of the members are either psychologically not okay, or they come from broken families, or that sort of societies.
There was people from all different aspects of life that were involved in this. In the different groups, it kind of varies, the dynamics, of the different types of people that are involved in it. In the NSM, the people that were involved were mostly working class, blue collar people, working people, and poor. And a lot of times people that are struggling to get by in life, they're looking for answers. And unfortunately, groups like this give answers. Now, they don't give the correct answers, but they give answers, and they provide scapegoats. And that's exactly what this movement did. So, I mean, you had, in some of the groups, you had people from all different walks of life. And we did have that in the NSM, but the vast majority were working class, blue collar people. But there was every people involved from, a lot of them had military experience. By the time I left the group, almost half of the group probably had military experience of some sort or another, because the group was heavily focused on recruiting veterans and things like that. You have anybody from doctors and police officers and people from all walks of life, but predominantly it was your blue collar and your working class people. And in some of the groups, like I said, it varies, but like wealthy people, no, I didn't. I mean, in some of the groups there might have been, but I didn't really know people that were really well off, because they had no reason to be involved in something like that. So there was a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds, and it wasn't just people that had traumatic life experiences or things like that. There was people from all different walks of life and different reasons for being involved. So for some, it might be a sense of belonging. For some, it was looking for answers. For some, it was reciprocal radicalization. There was people that would join, and they say, well, I want to fight the left. I fear the left. Hatred is based on fear. A lot of what is involved in these movements is fear-based. If somebody would have said that to me when I was involved, they would have said, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm not afraid of nothing. No, we're not afraid of nothing. That's the common mindset. But when you break it down and you psychologically analyze it and you go through these things, it is almost entirely fear-based. White replacement theory, fear of your jobs being taken away, fear of immigrants, fear. It's a lot of fear.
Jeff, when there is a terrorist organization like Al-Qaeda or ISIS, Islamic State, there are well-known preachers, people from the religious background, and they have scripts, written for the followers. How did you get information about neo-Nazi as an ideology, and how did you prepare what you're gonna to say to people? Because it's like 25 years, and you have to say something so they follow those ideas and they respect you as a leader.
Well, the ideology is old, but we Americanized it in a lot of ways and did updates and changes and things like that to keep it relevant, or to keep it Americanized, the National Socialism. But a lot of the belief system was old from National Socialist Germany, combined with American principles and things like that in later years. So there was it evolved in a lot of ways, the politics in some ways to keep up with the times and things like that. But as far as speeches and things like that went, I always just spoke from the heart and what I believed in. I would make a note card. A lot of times it would be on the way to a rally or away to the event. I would just grab a note card and I would jot down a few ideas of subjects that I wanted to talk about. And it's kind of it's the same way I do things now when I speak, because it's from the heart, people will feel it and they'll be inspired by it. And I think that's the only way. I never read off of scripts or things like that, because I always felt like that was sort of rehearsed or practiced. It didn't come from the heart. And I think that people follow and listen to things that they're inspired by. And if you're sitting up there reading off of a piece of paper, it doesn't inspire people.
How does such an organization live? Like, do you have donations from the members or membership fees, or you sell some stuff, or how is it in practice? Because we know America is 300 million and something people, so it's a big market, for the ideology, and everyone speaks English, which is quite different from the European Union, where we have like more nations, more languages. So it's much easier to sell something or to ask for something in the United States. So how is financing working in that neo-Nazi movement?
So with the group that I was involved in, there was membership fees and there was monthly donations, but that was all fairly minimal. It was hard to finance the group. Different organizations, some did quite well on that. I don't know if I just wasn't very good at fundraising, or that the people were too poor. A lot of times the people just didn't have the money to contribute. But one of the ways that I financed things was I ran a record label, or a business aspect, and that was my job, because the organization didn't pay enough to take a wage or anything like that. So I worked for the record label for the store, and selling merchandise, clothing, music, you name it, anything to do with the cause. And that also helped in some ways fund the organization. And then, of course, the membership would fund the organization as well, with donations and membership fees and things like that. So every group is different. Some raise money quite well.
And do you have any restrictions in the United States when you sell items where we can find maybe swastika or some neo-Nazi symbols?
In the United States, it's freedom of speech and freedom of expression. So we don't have the laws like in Europe. I know at the time, because the store was international, so that we were selling and trading with people all over the world. And I know in Europe, a lot of the stuff was banned, and letters were coming in from the German government and things like that saying, this CD you guys released is banned. These are the words that these are the lines in the lyrics that are banned, and why, and things like that. So we didn't really have that here, but there was a lot of censorship that was going on in some ways, where we were being kicked off social media. Credit card processors didn't want to work with the organization or things like that. So there was some challenges in that sense of it, but that was coming from the private sector. With the United States Constitution, the freedom of speech and expression is absolute. So unless you're threatening to cause someone harm, like someone specifically, that's illegal. But otherwise, the freedom of speech and expression is free flowing.
I know it might be maybe more difficult to speak about, but how was that moment that you started to think about maybe that's not for me, I might quit that organization? How difficult was that process? Because, after 25 years, it feels like going out from home or from people that you like. So how was it?
It was hell. It was hard. It was hard, but it was the right thing to do. For me, I left the movement in 2009, early 2019, but I probably should have left in about 2016. So in 2016, I started doubting things. I had started meeting people that were outside of my sphere of influence, so to speak, is what I was involved in. I had met an African American man by the name of Daryl Davis, who's like a brother and a friend of me now today. And I had met a Muslim filmmaker by the name of Dia Khan, and a lot of other people that are not public figures, but I can mention them because they're public figures, but a lot of other people as well. Living in Detroit, white people are the minority here. So, and I'd lived in Detroit since 2007, and just meeting different people, and you start to see the humanity in others, and Daryl and Dia especially were very, very good at that. They were asking questions, they were trying to understand why I thought the way I thought, and at the same time they shared very personal experiences about themselves and their life stories and how racism and hate affected them as children. And here I'm coming from a standpoint where I'm thinking I'm doing this, this positive thing for my people. I'm standing up for my race, my country, and my family, my children. And when I heard their stories about how racism and hate affected them as children, and some of what took place, I thought about my own children. What if somebody would have done that to my children? How would I have felt? All of a sudden, reality, it kicks you in the head, and you're sitting there going, whoa, maybe this isn't so good after all. Look, if this is what it does to people, if this is the effect it has on other people, how is that positive? And so I started questioning things around that period of time, around 2016. And I kept making excuses. I kept thinking, and I know this is going to sound really strange, I think, to some people, but I had convinced myself that the National Socialist Movement, the Nazi Party, was a white civil rights organization. I was demanding, when I was talking to the media and when I talked even amongst the group and to the public, this is a white civil rights organization, and that's how we want it to be explained. That's the way you should refer to it as. So what I was doing, processing all that after I got out, I was like, man, I was trying to put lipstick on a pig. I was trying to dress up the Nazi Party as something it could never be, because my own views were changing in the process, and I was trying to change the group in the process. So that was psychologically how I was trying to deal with it. And then after, by the time I left in early 2019, I'd been thinking about it for some time, but who could I talk to? Who could I tell that to? Like anybody that you were questioning it, they're going to try to reel you back in, try to pull you back in. So before I left, I talked a little bit with Dia about it. I talked with my father, and a couple of girlfriends, and that was about it. You could count them on one hand how many people knew that I was going to leave, because I was struggling with it. And then I was thinking about things like, well, what if I left and the next person that takes over the organization or whatever, what if they have people do bad things, terrible things, because like I said, I felt responsible in a lot of ways. And so sometimes, new people would come and they'd say, should we go do this? Should we go do that? And it would be illegal things. And no, don't, you can't do that. That's not allowed in this organization. You'll be thrown out. You'll be, it's not allowed. So all these things are going through my head, like, okay, if I leave, these things are going to happen. And then selfish things too, like, well, if I leave, what about my business? That's what I did for a living for years and years and years. Who's going to hire you? Who's gonna have anything to do with you? Because all they got to do is put my name in Google and look it up on the internet. Any employer anywhere you're going to be hired is going to do that, and they're going to see what 25 plus years of neo-Nazi activity, and appearances and all these different shows and news stories and so on and so forth. So that was a concern too. And eventually with that one, there was that I just had to take a leap. I just had to say, you know what? It doesn't matter. You'll figure this out. But this is not right what you're involved in. And my conscience wouldn't be clear. So it would have been easier for me to fake it and to keep going and then just say things that I didn't believe in. It would have been easier in that sense, but it wouldn't have been the right thing to do. It wouldn't have been honorable. It wouldn't have been right in my heart or in my mind, and I couldn't do that. So I was always driven by principles, even when I was involved. So nothing was going to change in that sense. I couldn't change. I couldn't fake it. I couldn't stay involved. I tried to change it for a few years. And then when I realized, like, you can't change this, there was different signs and different things that were coming up that told me, that showed me that I couldn't change it. Like and I could give you an example of that. Just not too long before I left the organization, I had to make a policy, and a lot of these policies were kind of unwritten rules. A lot of them were down in the handbooks and membership books and things like that. But I made a policy for social media. And this was kind of one of the wake-up calls for me, because it was like I had to make a policy that was telling members specifically, do not post illegal things online. Do not post things that have to do with violence. Do not have to post things with that. Now, the majority of people in the group weren't doing that, but there was a handful that were doing things like that, like posting pictures from a genocide or reposting something about a burning mosque and things like that. And these were people that I knew for quite some time. And it was like, you guys know better than this, and you're still posting it. Why? And then the answers were like, well, I didn't make the meme. I just reposted it. And I'm like, how can I reconcile with this? If they think that's funny or that's okay, and even if that's not the majority, there is people in these groups that think like that. They do find that stuff funny, or they do say it's ironic humor, or that it's acceptable, or that it's normalized. That's not the kind of people I want to be associated with. That's not the kind of people I want to be affiliated with. And if I'm having to make those kind of policies, what does that say about the belief system? It was the same thing with people that were going out and committing mass shootings and things like that. I can tell you, like, every time that sort of thing happened, I would like look through the membership rolls. If a guy went and did a mass shooting, I'd look through the membership rolls and go, oh my God, I hope this person is not a party member. I hope this isn't a member, and okay, they're not. Okay, good. And instead of thinking this ideology might be triggering people to do these terrible things, myself and so many others just dismissed that as, it's not like we thought that was good. We thought those things were horrible. Most of us did. But we thought like that the person was crazy, that they went crazy. We never blamed the ideology, and that was so strange. Looking back now, it's like, clearly, if it was one person or two people, okay, you could say maybe the person was mentally unhinged and they went and they did that. But it's one after another, after another, after another. There's something wrong with the ideology. But when you're embedded in it and you're part of it, you don't see that. So.
But I want to ask one last thing about your, let's say, conversion. And that's, for many, it's just unthinkable. Jeff Schoep and the Simon Wiesenthal Center. So you send a job application with the 25 years of neo-Nazi experience, and they accepted you, or how was it?
That's a good question. So Simon Wiesenthal Center had contacted me after I got out of the movement, and when I made the announcement that I was going to speak out against racism. One of their representatives, the chief of their research division, had reached out, and his name is Rick Eaton. And Rick had reached out, and he says, would you like to meet? Would you like to meet up? I said, yeah. So let's meet up. And I went up and I met with them, and I explained, my intentions of speaking out against hate and racism, and they do a lot of that as well. And one thing that was really interesting, I said, well, it was nice meeting you, Rick. It was really nice meeting you. And he goes, we've met before. And I says, no, I don't think so. He goes, yeah, we did. And then he rattled off where we met. It was at a small Christian identity gathering where I was speaking at this small private gathering, and he was undercover there. So we had met at that time, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that. I mean, we knew there was always people undercover and stuff. We didn't always know who. So that was quite interesting. But yeah, the Simon Wiesenthal Center for People in the Movement, it was a pretty scary group. That was the original Nazi hunters. So for me, the irony of that is, um, the Jewish community, I have to say, they were the community that I dehumanized and vilified the most. Most people would say, especially, for years and years that, and I've explained this as well too, like I'd let go of racism a number of years before I left the NSM. And I said to people and they just look at me like, well, what are you talking about? But I was a raging anti-Semite. I was so anti-Semitic, and people thought I was in the movement. People thought I was expert on the Jewish question and all this. Well, the truth was, I thought I knew all this stuff about the Jewish people, but I really didn't. Today some of my closest friends are Jews and of the Jewish faith, and I've learned so much more by spending time with them, um, sharing meals. When I'm on the road, sometimes I'll stay with different Jewish families and different people. I learned about Orthodox households and different sinks and all the different things about keeping kosher and all that. I didn't know any of this stuff, but I thought I did. And when you see the humanity in the people that you once vilified, and they show you that type of compassion and forgiveness and understanding, being able to ask questions freely and have people explain it was mind-blowing. It was life-altering. And those of us that were involved in this stuff, we carry a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, a lot of regret. I remember that stuff. I try not to live in it because it's not mentally healthy to do so, but I remember that stuff. And I've learned so much from the past, and having those human connections and being able to ask those questions is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about speaking out now and trying to help people. Because if we can reach people before they get radicalized, before they get to the point where I was and so many others were, show them in school at a young age that, hey, people may worship different, their skin tint may be different, their skin color may be different, they may choose a different God than you choose. We are all united in our shared humanity more than anything. And instead of being fearful or hateful of those different cultures or customs, learn about them. Ask questions and understand why, people engage in their different customs and cultures. And you might find that it's quite interesting and it's quite fascinating. I know I sure do. And my love for history and my interest, what drew me into the movement, also that I want to say open-mindedness. Originally, I was open-minded in life, and that's why I got into this stuff. When I got into it, your mind slams shut. Now you're closed-minded and you're narrow-minded and bigoted. But reopening that and being able to rehumanize is so critically important. And then you're back in humanity, and it's life is just so much better.
Jeff, how has the digital landscape, especially social media, shaped radicalization in the United States? Some students might ask, is this working mostly online, like all those communication events, movements, acceptance to be a member, or it is more based on a personal, let's say, recommendation?
It's both. When I got involved in the early days, it was all, personal communications and stuff like that. It was before the internet was a big thing. Now, a lot of the radicalization is happening online. Um, algorithms are driving, for example, we could say you're interested in Bigfoot, and you look up Bigfoot on the internet. Now all the algorithms are driving more conspiracy theories or more everything that has to do with Bigfoot. Now you're getting aliens and all kinds of other things that you're looking up. And the same can be said with far right extremism, far left extremism, Islamic extremism, you name it, any kind of extremism. When you're looking that stuff up, now your algorithms are driving that. And for a lot of these people, a lot of your mass shooters, a lot of these individuals that are doing terrorist attacks have been radicalized online. It wasn't like years ago. You still have your groups and things like that, but in real life, activities. But a lot of people are being radicalized on their own online, and they're taking the ideologies and they're acting on them. So it's a serious problem online.
In what ways social economic disparities fuel radicalization in the United States?
Economic disparities are a huge part of it. It's overlooked quite often, but it's a huge part of it. Like I had mentioned earlier, the wealthy people are not involved. There's very few. I'm sure there's some, but there's very few that are involved. It's the people that are really struggling. And what's interesting about that, and especially psychologically, is you're involved in, say, a group like the NSM or the Klan or any of these type of organizations, and you're speaking down and you're looking down upon minority communities, Black communities, other communities. These are the same people that are struggling just like you are. There's actually more, you have more in common with them than you do the elites and these other people. So it's a huge issue, but they're scapegoating and they're blaming the Jews or blaming the Blacks or whoever. There's always somebody to blame other than looking in the mirror or trying to improve your life. Like I said, these groups offer solutions or answers, excuse me. They offer answers. They're not the right answers. But when someone goes, that's what it is. That's why I'm poor. That's why I struggle. They feel like they've woken up and now they have a cause to fight for and they have something to believe in and they have the so-called answers, even though they're the wrong answers. They have that mission and that purpose now. And so economic disparities are a huge part of it. And that goes into a lot of where some people think doxing and things like that are good, like, oh, let's show where this person works, let's show where they live and all that. I can tell you every time I was doxed, and just about everybody that I know that was doxed or that had their information put out or lost jobs, most of the people in the movement lost jobs over this stuff or had different kind of trouble. Instead of it having the so-called desired effect where they go, oh, well, I've been doxxed. Now I'm going to get out of this. I'm going to quit being this person. It does not work like that. I could tell you hundreds and hundreds of people, maybe thousands of people that have been doxxed that had the opposite effect on them. I could tell you a handful, maybe a handful that left over being doxxed, and they were not ideologically committed. That same person that left over being doxxed could have tripped and stumbled and been like, oh, I'm done with the movement. They weren't serious in the first place. So it is, holding up those instances and saying it works because this guy or this lady left, it doesn't hold weight. It's not true. It's not accurate. What it does is it drives people further into that ideology. You get this victim mentality, I would say, in a lot of ways in your head. It's like, well, they did this to me, so now I'm going to fight back twice as hard. And that's the way psychologically it worked for me, is every time pressure was put on me, whether it was by the law enforcement, whether it was by Antifa groups, whether it was violence. I've got scars across the back of my head from attacks and things like that. I'm scarred up. Anything like that, it had the opposite effect. I would double down. I would get more involved. I'd get more active, and it encouraged it fueled the fire, so to speak.
You mentioned that approximately 50% of the members, they had some sort of military background. So my question, maybe logical one, Is there an impact of the US interventions abroad on the radicalizations in the United States?
So that's a really good question. The NSM in particular was heavy on recruitment of veterans, and that was for a number of different reasons. The structure of the organization, the way we set it up, was like based on a ranking system, so it had a lot of familiarity with the military structure. The structure was there, so when someone got out of the military, if they were looking for that camaraderie and brotherhood and a mission and a cause, something to fight for, it was provided in that sense. Again, in the wrong sense, but it was that familiarity. Not all of the other groups, in fact, most didn't have that sort of structure and did not have as many veterans in the group as NSM did. But it was also it was careful how we approached it. In the sense of, we'd say, well, we don't believe in a lot of these foreign wars, but we still support the troops. And I know I got into arguments sometimes with other groups and other group leaders, especially when there was alliances and things like that, where other groups were saying, we're not flying American flags. I don't know why the NSM does that. And we don't like what the military is doing. And they would say disparaging things about veterans. I'd tell them, you got to be careful and stop running at the mouth, because you're surrounded by veterans in this room. Don't talk like that. So it was very a delicate way, I guess we would approach that. But there was multiple reasons why military people would get involved in that sense.
What's about people coming from prisons?
The prison to radicalization pipeline is formidable. It's quite extreme. There was a lot of people that would go into prison and they didn't have any racial beliefs or things like that, and they would come out and they'd be racist, because in a lot of prisons things are very tribalistic. They're divided up along racial lines. There's a lot of race-based stuff going on in there. So you had a lot of radicalization going on in the prison systems, but and that varied as far as different groups as well, because in a lot of people think, when they think of white supremacist groups, that it's all kind of the same, but there's so many different levels. Like you have your accelerationists and these people that are openly promoting violence. And then you have, the above ground groups like your NSM and groups like that. And then you have your prison type groups like your Aryan Brotherhood, Aryan Circle, et cetera, that are engaged in like criminal activities and things like that. Specifically, that's the driving force behind those groups. So yes, they were racial, but it was more based, some of those are more based on criminality. So when you had people coming out of the prison systems, you had to make sure that they weren't getting involved in criminal activities and things like that. So in the organization I was involved in, there was rules and regulations on that sort of thing. If someone was involved in serious criminal activity or violence or things like that, they could be thrown out. But other groups would seek out those kind of things. It just really depended on the organization, but it's definitely a serious pipeline and it's a serious problem.
Now, as you are on, let's say, other side, what sort of driving forces of or waves of extremism can you observe from that other side? Like, is it only neo-Nazi, or maybe there are different streams that you would like to mention, so we have the whole picture or the spectrum of those ideologies?
Yes, thank you for asking that, because I think a lot of times when people talk about radicalization and they think about this sort of thing, they just focus on the far right. And for one, that's not accurate, and it's not wise. There's something called reciprocal radicalization, and a lot of people that were involved in the cause joined because they wanted to fight against the far left, and vice versa. On the far left extremists, a lot of people are getting involved because they want to fight the far right. So this is called reciprocal radicalization. It's wanting to fight the other side, and you become more and more radical in your belief in doing so. So, there's far right radicalization, there's far left radicalization, there is religious radicalization. You look at groups like ISIS or Al Qaeda, and you wonder, a lot of times people think like, look, this guy's chopping off somebody else's head. They must be inherently evil, and of course it is evil, but in that person's mind, they're doing the work of God. They've been completely radicalized. They think just like, I had explained earlier about thinking that I was doing something honorable and noble. The ISIS radicals and people that are beheading people also believe that. Of course, you're going to have a percentage of psychopaths and sociopaths that are doing these kind of things in those types do tend to be drawn to more radical organizations. And I have crossed paths with those people in my life, unfortunately. But they are the minority, in just the percentage of the population. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's quite small. So most of the people have been radicalized to these beliefs, and they're doing terrible things in the name of their ideology. And it's not just far right, but it can be all kinds of different political spectrums, religious spectrums, you name it. Even to some degree, gangs fit into, and cults fit into these categories. I know that's a little different, obviously, but there is some similar dynamics. But one thing I think that was really fascinating for me, I can say when I was involved in the far right, I always thought like, oh, well, we can defeat the far left anytime we want because they're not committed. They're not ideologically committed like we are. So we're going to beat them anytime. And that was that narrow-minded thinking. Once I got out and I was able to process things and better understand it and learned about the radicalization from all sides, religious, political, and all that, the social structures of these groups, even across the spectrum of ideologies, the radicalization process, the thought process, and the social structure are quite similar across all these different lines. So if you have somebody that knows about right-wing extremism, they probably also know about left and the religious extremism as well, because there's so many similarities. And that, for me, that was really surprising at first. Now it just totally makes sense. But at first it was like, wow, I can't believe it that, meeting people. I'd met a number of former Al Qaeda fighters and people that had served in ISIS and different things like that. And then to hear their stories and to see the similarities in the process. And same with Antifa and far left, meeting people from there and helping people leave that life and hearing their stories. The thought processes and stuff were so similar. Obviously, the politics are very different, but the thought processes were so similar. And that was really fascinating.
How connected is, let's say, American movement with some different parts of the world? For instance, when you were a leader of the neo-Nazi group, what was your connection with Germany, UK, maybe Asia, maybe Japan, maybe China? I don't know, maybe different countries. Because many students are interested in sharing information. For instance, you were walking or marching or having some events, and you had some posters or flags or some badges, So is this something that you shared with the world and people are interested in? Or we can say that American movement is more independent, more close. So you're basically doing things that you consider as right one in the United States, but you don't export those ideologies or those innovations to the world.
Well, it's definitely exported. It was worldwide as far as the movement went. Some groups have international chapters and things. NSM did, and some other organization, quite a few other organizations did. And you maintain contact with organizations across the world and things like that as well. So there was the focus, at least in the organization that I was in, it wasn't heavily focused on international recruitment because international recruitment was kind of small. There was like the chapters were small, the membership was small overseas. We were primarily focused on America, but that varied from group to group, and you still had contacts with other organizations. Like in the 90s or in the early days, you would swap publications, through the mail and things like that. Later, that went to e-zines, and things like that. And of course, with the music industry, trading with labels all over the world, and bands and different things like that from all over the world. So it's very much global, but the groups vary from every different country, and there's different rules and regulations in different countries too. So like groups like the NSM were not functioning out in the open in like Germany or anything because it was banned there. So.
What about the US strategies from the law enforcement to tackle those groups? What sort of challenges are those strategies facing? And based on your experience, are they working, or you think that they should go through some sort of innovation?
Well, and I didn't mention this, but I do some law enforcement trainings, especially in my role with Simon Wiesenthal Center. We have done some law enforcement trainings, and primarily what we focus on in that, for one, law enforcement really doesn't have my experience across the country, they don't have a really good grasp on what's going on in these groups. They have, a basic understanding of it, but they sort of a simplified understanding of it, I guess you could say, where they don't know the difference between like the gangs, like white power gangs and prison gangs and accelerationists and your above ground organizations. They're familiar more with the above ground organizations because that's what they see out on the streets and things like that. But we will show them things more about some of the accelerationist groups, some of the groups that are talking about, and a lot of this is going on online in the dark web and different places, Telegram and different channels, where they're talking about taking down power stations and doing terrorist type activities. That I think is the greatest threat to our country, and that's something that law enforcement needs to be well aware of. And so that's primarily the focus, the methods that I look at. When I talk with law enforcement, I don't think they need to necessarily be overly concerned about the groups that are staying within illegal. It's ugly, it's abhorrent, it's hateful. But if it's within the law, there's not a lot they can do about it. But they do need to be aware of some of the more accelerationist groups that are targeting facilities and encouraging people to get involved in illegal activities. That's some of that stuff. I can tell you, I didn't see it when I was involved in the movement, not very often, especially being involved in an above ground organization. But it is shocking. It is absolutely shocking to see some of the stuff that some of my colleagues have come across, especially like we were in one group, 13 and a 14-year-old or a 13 and a 15-year-old boy were leading one accelerationist group, and they were sharing ISIS cooking videos and showing video, which is not cooking, is showing how to make bombs in your kitchen. And things like that. And they were sharing beheading videos and other things like that. And that was just in one city, because we were doing a training in that city and thought, well, let's look and find what we can show them that's local, that this is not in another state or on the other side of the country. This is in their backyard. And that we came across that in particular. So this is happening all over the place. And, if we can stop people from acting on those things and getting involved in that, it's going to save lives. So it's incredibly important.
Do you have any community-based movements against radicalization and extremism, or maybe some special programs where you have the cooperation with the schools, maybe local councils?
We're trying to get more involved in that sort of thing. I'm still kind of learning a lot of that, how that works. And the Simon Wiesenthal Center has a program called Combat Hate that goes into the schools, and I've had some involvement with that, which I think is really helpful. They've also have a Museum of Tolerance and the Mobile Museum of Tolerance, which is a bus that's just in one state now, and I think they have one in Canada as well. But it goes to different schools, and it's like a museum, and it'll show people different things. So, Wiesenthal is making a lot of good efforts in that department. But I would personally, I would like to get more stuff going on with the schools because that's something I'm passionate about, and for a reason. I mean, the younger, if we can reach people, and I've spoken to classes as young as sixth grade, and we were speaking with middle school and high school. I thought, oh, sixth grade might be kind of young. I tell you what, the sixth graders, some of them were asking better questions than the middle schoolers in the seventh grade. So I think at young ages, to be able to understand that, bring things to bring humanity together, and teach young people that hate and racism is not a helpful thing for them.
Just Jeff, can you please just clarify sixth grade, seventh grade? Which age is it for the Europeans?
Oh boy!
So we can imagine like what sort of children or youths you were speaking with.
I think it's about 12 years old is sixth grade, I think.
Okay.
I could be off a year or two, but I think it's about 12 years old.
Right.
It's been a little while since my kids were that age, so I don't remember anymore. But yeah, that's about that age.
Jeff, the world is speaking about the artificial intelligence. What's your opinion about artificial intelligence of being used on both sides?
Whoa, I don't think anybody's ever asked that question before. It's such a new thing that we're seeing. I'm seeing a little bit of it where they're using different things on both sides, to radicalize and to de-radicalize on that. I don't think there's anything we can do necessarily at this point to stop artificial intelligence. I think it's a thing of the future. It's something that in many ways can improve our lives, but in other ways it could be very dangerous. Nobody knows. That's the scary thing, I guess, about it is we don't know where that's going. I've seen things now where they're generating images of people, videos, and things like that, and you can't even tell. You can unless you know what to look for, you're not even sure if that's, really a person or not, and or if it's generated AI. So that's I think that's going to open up a lot of challenges in the future, as the technology gets better and better in that sense. And it's definitely something that I think a lot of governments around the world are kind of talking about it, about what can be done. Should we be regulating this stuff? I think Elon Musk even said that we should have a pause on some of that because we just don't know where some of that's going.
What is the age category of people who are the most vulnerable to join radical groups, extremist groups, based on your experience? I know you spoke about children that you were speaking to at schools, but also from your experience as a leader, what sort of applications you receive, like what sort of age categories? Because this is like emerging problem in Europe. We have younger and younger people involved in radicalization. It's not a surprise, some of them are 14, 15 years old, and they think they will change the world, because they believe to those ideologies. How is the situation in the United States?
It's the same. We're seeing some of the groups, they don't allow membership for under 18, but that doesn't mean those kids as young as 12 years old are not getting radicalized online. Even video games like Roblox, for example, and I know they've been very diligent about trying to stop people from using their platform for nefarious purposes. But these are games that are geared towards children, like 12 years old, like Legos and things like that. And you've got radicals, extremists that are in there propagandizing and recruiting these young kids, and feeding them that ideology. So it's difficult to say I would say the most vulnerable are the young people, because even if they're not actively, say, joining a group, they are being exposed to this stuff online. And the parents, especially when I've spoken to parent groups, when you say, hey, are your kids online playing Roblox or Minecraft or these builder games? just about everybody in the room. Yeah, yeah. Did you know that in those games they have things that are, and people that are radicalizing your children, and they're just horrified because you can't watch what the child is doing 24 hours a day. It's not a police state in the home. So these groups are finding ways to get around that stuff and radicalizing young people. So I'd say the young people are the most vulnerable to it. And that's why I think it's so important to reach them. But the like membership in these groups is all over the place, though. Some of the groups are geared more towards, young men. Some are geared towards older people. Some are geared towards youth. The one I was involved in had all ages. You had young people, everything from 18 and up, and to people that were senior citizens. So it really kind of depends on the group, but I'd say the most vulnerable is the young people because they're being exposed to the information age that we're in now. Is a lot of times I'll refer to as like short attention spans. And you're seeing it with reels and these little clips that you see all the time where it's like just a few seconds. And that's all because it's for short attention spans. And that's because we're being bombarded with information. When we were children growing up, you might have had a couple of TV stations. Now you've got hundreds. Nobody knows what to watch because there's just so much. And that's the way information is these days. It's so fast and it's coming from all different directions. So our children are the most vulnerable to that sort of thing, especially with the algorithms and being bombarded with that sort of thing. They're having it pounded into their head, and you don't need a group standing on the street corner to do that. It's being done online, and it's very disturbing.
We can't skip a question about the US presidential election, and I don't want to speak about the figures like Donald Trump or Joe Biden, but I want to speak about two political parties, Democrats and Republicans. And I want to know your opinion how those two political parties have been, let's say, pursuing some anti-radicalizations, or how they were fighting against extremism in the United States. Do they have any strategies, or do they have any programs like how to tackle extremism in the United States?
Ooh, I think both parties are both parties are concerned with radicalization. I do think that's a concern, but be careful how I answer this. I don't know what exactly programs they have going is for different things like that. I know what we offer, and I know we try to do our part, and I wish the government would do more. But I also think there's a lot of politicians that are sort of adding fuel to the fire in a lot of ways. On both sides of the spectrum, I've seen, on the Democratic side, all the way up to the president, Joe Biden, calling people on the other side, MAGA people, extremists, and it's not, and vice versa on the Republican side, and they're saying, these people are communists and that, and I think that on both sides is adding to that reciprocal radicalization that I talked about earlier. And people are becoming, where you're seeing mainstream ideas in the middle of the spectrum, right and left, those voices are being less heard, and you're hearing the louder voices on the more extreme sides, and more people are leaning towards those extremes. So we're seeing a divide in the country and a polarization in the country that I'm kind of surprised that we're seeing in our lifetimes, and it's unfortunate. And we need real leaders, and we need voices of reason, to step forward and say, enough of this. Let's get back to some things we can agree on. Of course, we're not going to all agree on everything, but we have to stop with this calling people extremists. It reminds me of when I was in the movement, and and the extreme radical left groups would call everybody that they didn't agree with them Nazis. And I remember when I was in the NSM, I was like, yes, please keep calling everybody, call conservatives Nazis. Keep saying that, because it's going to drive them to us. And that's what people need to think about when they're saying things like that, is there's going to be people that go, you know what? You called me a Nazi too many times. Now I'm going to go be one. And that's not, it's not the right way to go about things, but it's human nature for some. It's the same. It's the same. It is all part of that reciprocal radicalization that can take place, and it's a dangerous trajectory that we're seeing in the country and in different parts of the world. And we need to be very mindful of that and be very careful of it and get back to our shared humanity and in the middle. We can be right and left. There's nothing wrong with that, but don't go out to those extremes and don't hate other people in the process.
The last question for today's interview, Jeff. What should we expect or anticipate in the future when it comes to extremism and radicalization in the United States? And the second little question, what or how should scholars help to tackle the radicalization and extremism in the United States? How can we help you with what you're doing?
Well, I think in the United States, I think we're seeing a lot of radicalization, but I think there's hope. There's got to be hope. There's people out there that are doing good work, that are trying to reach other people, trying to bring humanity together. And I think if we had more leaders that can do that, bring people together, and it's okay not to agree, but we have to see the shared humanity in one another and not get involved in othering and things like that. And as far as what scholars and other people can do to support the work, I think just the more we can keep moderate and effective voices out there and steer away from some of the extremism. I guess one of the critiques I have is a lot of times people that are involved in doing a lot of really good work and speaking out and against racism and hate, they refuse to acknowledge that there's any radicalization on their side of things. And I've taken a lot of flack for pointing these things out, but I don't care. I mean, I'm not going to, if I'm going to speak, I'm going to speak from the heart. I'm going to speak honestly. And I've been at different things where I've heard people say, well, there is no left-wing radicals. That's not a thing in the United States. And I don't know, I've seen it. I've experienced it. Everybody knows it. And then when you have somebody that comes in and says it's not true, it doesn't exist, then it just adds to the problem. It adds to reciprocal radicalization. It makes people angry that they're being lied to and that they're being or misinformed. So I think we need to be very introspective, and that's coming from a place because I'm coming from a place where I was not introspective at all. I was the guy that always thought he was right and believed what I was fighting for, and I couldn't introspect. I couldn't see anything outside of that. So I'm coming from a place of, I know what I'm talking about now, because I've been there. I was one of those people. So understanding that and trying to introspect and to look at all and consider all different things instead of saying, you know what, confirmation bias, this fits my narrative, I'm going to be part of this. Look at and understand why other people have come to their conclusions, what experiences they had in their life that might have drawn them to that conclusion, and try to be open to different perspectives. So I know that was kind of a roundabout answer. There's so many things that can be done, but I think this important work on healing, stopping racism and things like that. And by stopping racism, we cannot have reverse racism and look at the world as oppressed and oppressor. I think that's a big problem too, because when you start saying, well, this group of people is the oppressor, what you're doing is you're creating fear and angst in the people that were oppressed or that feel that they were oppressed, and you're calling the other person an oppressor. Now they feel bad as well. So these are not helpful ways of looking at things. So I think that's again, it's a roundabout answer, but I think there's a lot that can be done in that sphere. And we have to stop looking at humanity and looking at one another through those lenses of he's wrong, she's wrong, I'm right, and just be more open to dialogue, because dialogue is the key to peace building, and it's the key to moving forward.
Jeff, thank you very much for your insightful thoughts, but also for honesty. To speak, from your heart about your past, about your present and future, which I think is not always easy one, because it's still 25 years and it has some sort of signs on a person and on a soul. But what you're doing at the moment with all the people around, with your organization, that's just amazing, and I think in some way you represent what America should do in a much larger scale in all the states in the United States. So the problem of radicalization and extremism is not emerging like it is, like I never thought that I will be speaking about radicalization and extremism in the United States when I'm going to be doing my studies and my articles. So on one hand, it's surprising to speak about those things. America was always considered as a symbol of democracy, freedom, human rights, living together as communities. Many people emigrated from Europe to United States, from different countries. And now we have that problem. So I wish you all the best and lots of energy to your work, because I think it's very difficult, but extremely useful. Jeff, thank you again for being on IO Thinker.